Against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, we will send unto them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
We must pray now. Pray that he is watching.
Please, anyone, if you can hear me, if you're out there.
Attempting to acquire the Hell Priest signal.
Nearly 60% of our planet has been consumed by the invaders.
We have the Hell Priest signal locked in. The target is marked, but the signal will not hold for long.
For it is he that they fear, not man, or his armies. They fear the mark of the beast.
Doom 2016 was a fantastic year for the shooter genre. You had Doom 2016, Devil Daggers, and Killing Floor 2. 3 games with something different to offer while still providing a great experience nonetheless. Doom 2016 was the power trip that harkened to the classic Doom games, rather than following the slower survival horror inspired footsteps of Doom 3, something that alienated a portion of the Doom community. It was fast, looked beautiful, some of the most polished and complete sense of gunplay I've ever seen, and some of the best level and sound design you'll find in a shooter. Devil Daggers was minimalistic but hard as nails. Its simple to understand but hard to master approach made players want to survive for as long as possible, constantly beating the high scores. Killing Floor 2 filled the void that was needed at the time. Taking a break from Left 4 Dead 2 and finding a good alternative, this game provided what I wanted. It had a slow but punchy kick to its gunplay and display of gore, all enjoyed by yourself or with other players. In the case of Doom 2016, it set such a high standard, was my game of the year, and set forth the boomer shooter trend that would be kickstarted by games like Dusk. Over the years, there was an unbelievable amount of hype for the eventual sequel, and people wondered how id Software could possibly top 2016. 2 years afterwards, id Software would once again shock everyone at QuakeCon, showing a sequel that not only exceeded expectations, but also far exceeded and expanded upon what Doom 2016 had already provided. Doom Eternal. More often than not, the sequels we get from any form of media leaves a lot to be desired. The best we can hope for is that it will be good, or just as good, but on the rare occasion we get something that is better than the last, like with Terminator 2 being better than the first one. In the context of Doom, Doom Eternal ends up being the better game overall, with more dynamic and faster gameplay, an arguably better soundtrack, a bigger variety of levels that make the Doom universe more epic and expansive, and visuals that feel like a resurrection of the classic Doom series. Now, as I go further into the video, I'll warn viewers that spoilers will be ahead, so if you haven't played Doom Eternal yet, I'd advise doing so first before watching this video. In 2020, we would finally get the game that blew us away back at QuakeCon, with something that felt and looked familiar, but was completely revamped in contrast to its predecessor, in more ways than one. From the gameplay, visuals, and designs of the weapons and enemies, have all gotten a complete makeover, going with something that was more in spirit with the classics. Now visually, I'm contested on the matter. While I love how expansive and fantastical Doom Eternal is, from the hell levels like Necrovol and Amora, to the ancient cities like Exaltia and Taras Nabad, and the complete and total devastation of Earth, all filled with some of the best attention to detail I've seen in a game, a part of me still wished that they still committed to the more grounded in reality vibe that Doom 2016 was filled with. In terms of gameplay though, I think it is leaps and bounds better than 2016, and I'll go into why later on. So the story more or less picks up after 2016, where Samuel Hayden took the Crucible and sent you back to hell. At least that's what we assume, because it's never once explained how we got to where we start in Doom Eternal. All of a sudden, hell invades Earth, and there's a looming fortress watching over the carnage, with the Doom guy himself taking command of it, as well as Vega making a return, cleaning up hell once again by going against the Khanmaker, a being who is spearheading Earth's consumption and harvesting the souls of humans. Samuel Hayden also makes a return, but he's been reduced to a meme this time around, becoming a source of exposition rather than a character with motives.
You can't just shoot a hole into the surface of Mars. That is a weapon, not a teleporter.
At least until the DLCs anyway. The game has a bigger cast of characters this time around, like the Hell Priests, the Betrayer, and to some extent the Marauder, someone who is a constant thorn that just won't go away. The game also reveals the Doom guy's face. Personally, I think they should have kept him faceless like in Doom 2016, where his presence and appearance gave players the impression that we were seeing a force of nature in action, a mysterious entity so to speak, something that takes the shape of a man. In Eternal, the character is humanized by showing us his face, and in effect eliminates the horror aspect that Doom 2016 had. In that game, we were the horror, not the demons. Speaking of which, they got a facelift, like I said. Some designs still carry over like the Imps, the Cacodemons, Hell Knights, Mancubis, Barons, Revenants, Pinkies, Zombies, and Soldiers, etc. But they have also been given some tweaks to fit the more colourful tone of Doom Eternal. The game also brings back other iconic foes like the Pain Elemental, the Tyrant, which is basically the Cyber Demon, Arachnotrons, and of course the Archvile. New demons have also been added to the roster, already expanding the demonic horde that the Doom guy has to contend with. Whiplashes and Carcasses, the most infuriating enemies in the whole series. The Prowler, which was in 2016, but was a multiplayer exclusive demon. Doom Hunters, which are annoying, at least until you realize that you can Ice Bomb it, negating its shield. Then you have Gargoyles, which are like Imps but 10 times more annoying. At some point, you'll eventually face an enemy called the Marauder, who was, for about a month, the hardest enemy in the game, until it was discovered that you can combo him after he is stunned, killing him in seconds, making him a joke. In fact, just to bully him, you can stun him, then BFG shot him, killing him instantly. The game also has boss fights, but they suck to be honest. The set pieces are great, but they function more as a puzzle than a genuine challenge where you meet your match. If the game had bosses like V2 and Minos Prime from Ultrakill, that would have been so much better. As I said in the Doom 2016 review I made, I had stated that I liked the more horror-centric designs of the demons and overall art style of 2016 more, because they made me realize that the only reason I wasn't fearing or dreading their presence was because of my prowess as the Doom Slayer. In Doom Eternal, that fear isn't there at all. In fact, the only thing they fear is you. Anyway, Eternal's designs are just as good if I'm being honest. I appreciated the desire of paying homage to the classic games, remaking the demonic forces into something that harkened back to the 90s. Take a look at the color palette of the Cacodemon, the overall design of the soldiers. The Hell Knight once again adopts a similar look to the one in Doom 3. The Mancubi itself also gets a facelift, literally, for it's got 2 eyes instead of 1, like the one in Doom 2. The enemies themselves behave more or less the same, randomly running around in a chaotic fashion, making you paranoid and always forcing you to reposition. But the way you approach them is drastically different this time around, and this is because of the gameplay. Hugo Martin and the other lead staff that worked on this game had stated that they didn't necessarily want to make another Doom 2016. If Doom was to get a sequel, it would have to try something different, even if that meant overhauling the game completely. The reception was massive. Lots of people had embraced the changes made, because it was not only faster, but more varied in its utilities, both in player abilities and weapon usage. The weapons themselves have been designed in such a way that you ultimately have no choice but to use your whole arsenal. Unlike in Doom 2016, where you could literally beat the whole game with just the rocket launcher, super shotgun, and Gauss cannon. People that expected more of 2016 will be disappointed by this, since from a philosophical and technical point of view, this game was not made for you. But that's not to say you can't play it like 2016, it's just that for newer players, it'll be much harder. Doom Eternal's combat flow and magic come into play when you finally embrace the layer of equipment and blood punch combos, weapon swapping, and exploiting enemy weaknesses. The core gameplay is centralized around these three things, and the longer you take to master them, the easier the game will become. The game in this sense is somewhat harder than 2016, since you no longer have the flexibility of just using whatever you want. In Eternal, you have to use everything if the goal in mind is to play it in the most optimal way possible. You can't really get away with just using the super shotgun because of the relatively low ammo count, which is replenished by the use of the chainsaw. Now that we're on the topic, pretty much all the weapons from Doom 2016 except the pistol make a return, with a number of different designs and even different mods, or variations or revamps of said mods. For instance, the Gatling rotator mod for the chain gun is gone, not that it was ever good anyway, and is replaced with the energy shield, one of the most useful mods you'll get to use in this game. The ballista is basically the Gauss cannon. The plasma rifle is much better this time around, with smoother aiming and faster projectiles. Since there's no pistol, your combat shotgun is the starting weapon, but it's pretty underpowered, at least until you get the explosive shot and the full auto mods. The mods themselves also correlate with the enemy weaknesses, like with the Unkybyr's cannons or the Arachnotron's turret. They can be shot off with an explosive shot, a precision bolt from the heavy assault rifle, or a direct hit with the ballista. You don't necessarily have to do this, but the option is there, and it generally makes your life easier. In fact, playing the game otherwise arbitrarily makes the game harder than it needs to be, especially if you're playing on Nightmare where you're expected to know the game inside and out from that point on. The chainsaw behaves the same as before, where you need fuel to use it, but this time it refills on its own, making it usable against enemy fodder as well as replenishing your ammo in the process. To take out bigger demons like the Hell Knight and the Unkybir, you need 3 charges. But considering the fact that ammo replenishing is based around the chainsaw, you'll mostly be using it against fodder, since there aren't a lot of ammo pickups this time around. Like 2016, the difficulty modes are pretty balanced, only escalating the damage threshold between enemies when they attack you. Ultra Nightmare makes a return, but it's the same deal. You die and you have to start all over again pretty much. For starting players, I would recommend Ultra Violence, and then just play Nightmare on default for the best overall experience. Only tackle Ultra Nightmare when you have the mind of a monk and the knowledge of a librarian. Sound-wise, it's a mixed bag again. The heavy assault rifle sounds punchy with the bass between shots, same as with the rocket launcher and the plasma rifle, but the shotguns sound terrible. They don't provide that disrupting noise I want from the weapon considering how powerful they can be. The sound quality itself is good, but the impact isn't really there for me. On the topic of sound in general, Doom Eternal is super crisp, from environments to movement, music, general noises and sound cues. It's very well put together and has a lot of polish, but considering how much effort was put into the predecessor, it was a safe bet to assume that id Software would go above and beyond for this one too. The game's upgrades are obtained by collecting Sentinel coins for your armor, points for weapons and allocation of Sentinel coins for the 2 grenades which are the Ice Bomb and the Frag Grenade, which provide more utility to the combat. The Blood Punch is a powered punch that when fully upgraded after completing certain levels can do a lot of damage to a crowd of enemies close by, especially if you combo it with the Flame Belch, a flamethrower that lets you replenish armor after damaging or killing an enemy. Runes don't make you do any silly challenges this time around, you just go up to them, select the one that you want, and then move on. You also don't need to upgrade them, thank God for that. You can only select 3, but having them do come in handy, especially saving throw if you're doing an Ultra Nightmare run. The map itself is more linear than before, but it's still chocked with secrets and supplies to help the Doom guy on his journey, and it's also full of tentacles. A lot of these secrets can be used at the Fortress of Doom, which functions as the game's hub so to speak. I really like the hub concept. You can take your time here, read through the codexes that you pick up that goes overboard in terms of the lore, and this game has a lot of it. Speaking of which, they wanted to pack as much of it as possible without it being too disruptive of the gameplay. The codexes are optional, made for those that are interested in learning more about the Doom universe, but for those that don't care, it won't get in the way. Visually, the game is a looker, more so than 2016. There's more attention to detail, a greater variety in the levels, creating this beautiful blend of sci-fi and medieval architecture, something that you would see in Quake 3 Arena and Quake Champions. I love this sort of stuff. Even with all the fire and brimstone, it's full of life. So I guess on this note, it's 50-50. I like Doom 2016's horror art style more, but Eternal is visually a more impressive game, and more varied in its level presentations. The game is packed to the brim with content, 13 levels, 2 DLCs that are harder than the main campaign, a horde mode with a variety of different game modes, a multiplayer mode called Battle Mode that, while I don't care that much about, does offer an admittedly interesting looking experience, where you either play as a demon alongside another player or the Slayer himself. And I almost forgot to mention the master levels, which are remixed versions of some of the existing levels, so to speak. The variety of content extends further to the customization of the Slayer and the demons. Weapons and armor skins can be grinded or bought for, and each one adds a different flair. Also, the game now has so many designs that even some of them pay homage to Doom 64 and Quake, as well as Doom 1 and Doom 2. Even Commander Keen gets a bit of love here. So in a way, Doom Eternal is more faithful to the franchise when you compare it to Doom 2016, from those points of view at least. Doom Eternal is pretty much a complete package, an extensive campaign with good pacing and expanded lore, to amazing DLCs that challenge the player in a lot of surprising ways, adding in new enemy variants and spirits that can ruin your run in a heartbeat. Great repurposing of weapons with mods that are all useful and depend on your preferred playstyle. With this and the 2 additional modes, such as Horde and Multiplayer, you won't be left wanting for content for a long time. In terms of modding, there is a thriving community that adds in new textures for demons, weapons, armor, even modes like the Cultist-based Slaughter map, which you can find in the description, as well as other remixed levels that add different takes on said levels. I've yet to explore them myself, but I definitely want to tackle them at some point and even talk about them. But it's great to know that some degree of modding is possible in a game like this, since the Doom franchise has always thrived on the capabilities of modding. It's also one of the main reasons why the classic Doom games are still played to this day. I do hope, however, that the next Doom has just as much flexibility, because Doom Eternal had so much potential in this regard, even though I understand that there were technical reasons for it why it isn't as moddable as the classics. It's taken me a while to get to this topic, but the soundtrack is just phenomenal. I would argue that it's even better than 2016. Tracks like Cultist Base, Meat Hook, and The Only Thing They Fear Is You are absolute bangers, especially Meat Hook. Mick Gordon had done it once again. Kind of, since there was a dispute between him and id Software in regards to getting the tracks done on time, and I'm still waiting for an official release on Spotify. But what he was able to put out, as well as the works of Chad Mossholder, Andrew Holsholt, and David Levy on the DLCs, have been commendable. I listen to Doom Eternal's soundtrack pretty regularly, especially when I'm exercising. It just presses all the right buttons for me. Like before, you have a fusion of metal and electronic music, but it feels more listenable this time around. In 2016, most of the tracks just fit only into the game, with some exceptions like BFG Division and Harbinger. But in Eternal, you could listen to the music generally, and it would still have the same effect as in the game itself. It's overall a much better soundtrack in this regard. The game has a lot going for it, a huge community, an insane level of polish and revamping to provide a new Doom experience different from the last one. At the time of its updates and patches, the developers would actually do playthroughs of the game, and heavily promote the Doom community that had begun to garner followings thanks to the success of the game. It's bolstered the existing community and gave birth to new ones. Even after 2 years of its release, the game is still being dissected to discover other treasure troves and gameplay exploits, as well as digging into the game's incredible pool of lore. Doom Eternal is a rich game, both in its amazing visuals, its faster gameplay, its massive world and massive roster of demons and iconic weapons. It may in fact be my favourite shooter ever. The only other game that could rival it at this stage is Ultrakill, which is a game that has been talked about often, so much so that there's been discourse among both communities lately. One saying that the other is better, or others expressing that one should be more like the other to fit their experience better. It's not really something I want to delve into any further myself, but I would like to do a comparison at some point when my knowledge of both games are more complete. So all in all, Doom Eternal is just incredible. Hardly any faults besides the annoying whiplash and carcass enemies, the lack of explanation as to what happened after Doom 2016, the low ammo count, the disappointing boss fights, and the abandonment of Doom 2016's already fantastic visual art style. Doom Eternal still exceeds its predecessor in almost every way, especially gameplay. Now while the game is no longer being worked on since they've now moved on to a new project, it is still very much alive thanks to its large community, and people are still making videos about it like I am, still playing it or still trying to secure that Ultra Nightmare run. It's a game that will be around for a very long time, and I cannot wait to see what id Software has in store next for the Doom franchise. Thank you for watching.